And Ukraine's President Volodimir Zelenskyy has urged the United Nations to expel Russia as a member and label it a terrorist state. He addressed the UN Security Council after a Russian missile struck a shopping mall, killing at least 18 people. Russia claims it wasn't targeting the mall, but instead fired on a weapons depot nearby.
According to Ukraine, this was the moment a Russian missile hit, sparking a fire that left this shopping mall in Kremenchuk in ruins and dozens of people dead and missing. With rescue workers still picking through the rubble in the city far from the front lines, residents are in shock.
Everything burned. Absolutely everything. Like a spark. I heard people screaming. I don't know how to describe it. It shocked me. It was horrible.
It's terrible beyond words. How many people were there? Rush hour, people were returning from work, lots of shops. There were always a lot of people in Amstor. Targeted, I think.
But Russia's defense ministry claims it didn't target the mall, saying it struck this nearby building instead. According to Moscow, it was ammunition being stored here exploding that started the fire. But both Ukrainian officials and locals denied there was a weapons depot in the area.
No, residential buildings, a shopping center, a football field, no military infrastructure.
On Tuesday, President Zelenskyy urged the UN Security Council to take action in response to the attack.
It is imperative to deprive Russia of the opportunity to manipulate the UN. It must be impossible for Russia to stay in the Security Council as long as its terrorism continues.
But with Russia holding veto power on the Council, there's almost no chance of it facing consequences at the UN for the destruction and death here in Kremenchuk.
And our correspondent Nick Connolly is in Kremenchuk at that shopping center that was hit by a Russian missile. Now, Nick, that video we've seen that the Ukrainian government says shows a Russian missile hitting the mall. What do you make of it?
Well, we've been trying to work out how far this all stacks up, how it all fits. We went to the site of the factory where that was filmed from. That's over there on the other side of the shopping center. And then where behind me you can see the impact site for that missile strike, and we compared the location, we compared what we saw on that video that was published by Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukraine's president, and with what we saw, and it all makes sense. You've got stuff at the factory in the foreground that is untouched, so that Russian explanation, that Russian version that somehow there was a detonation at the factory that spread here just doesn't stack up. If you look behind me here, there's basically devastation in the shopping center, but then there are green trees further over there that were not touched. The fire did not spread from that side. This was an impact that hit this shopping center. So behind me there, you see where the roof has basically been taken off. That is where the missile hit. And then slightly further to my other side, you can see the bits where the fire engulfed the shopping center, didn't bring the roof down, but basically turned everything that was there to dust. Everything that was inside that store. Incredibly acrid fumes still now, and the firefighters having to wear protective equipment, but it's just very dangerous working here. They've been working non-stop for basically 48 hours and are now basically largely occupied with trying to find the bodies of about 35 people that are still believed to be under that rubble.
Indeed, the attack on that mall is the most deadly of a series of missile strikes that we have seen on cities deep inside Ukraine over the last week. How is that affecting how Ukrainians are going about their daily lives?
It's definitely a shock. It's definitely a wake-up call. These warnings, these air raid signals, they often are on for about 3-4 hours a day. So if you're trying to go about your daily business, if you're trying to go about your job, basically you have a choice between earning a living and staying safe. Now, people here have been telling us that there was an additional warning on top of the normal region-wide warning for the city a couple of minutes before this shopping center was attacked. That allowed a number of people, we believe, to get out and to head to neighboring buildings and their cellars. So had it not been for that warning, probably many more people would have lost their lives. but it is very sobering. This is a city that is hundreds of kilometers away from the front lines, where basically they'd only seen attacks in the first few weeks of this war when Russia attacked the oil processing facility in the city, and since then they had largely been left alone and had basically been following the war in the news like everyone else. So the fact that this city, like anywhere else in Ukraine, is very definitely within range of those Russian cruise missiles has really been brought home by this attack. And lots of people we've spoken to here who said they are going to sign up to fight. They maybe were in the territorials, not sure if they wanted to go and fight the front lines, but seeing that even if they were just trying to go about their daily life, their families, their friends could end up the victims of a Russian missile attack has really rammed home the impact of this war to people living in cities in Ukraine that had thought they had kind of got past the worst of this.
Nick, before I let you go, I want to ask you about another development in this war. The Russian news agency TASS has announced that the Russian-controlled Ukrainian region of Kherson has begun preparations for a so-called referendum on joining Russia. Are we seeing an effort here by Russia to annex more Ukrainian territory?
Definitely looks that way. At the beginning of this war, we remember the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, talking about Russia having no intention to annex further Ukrainian territory. That obviously is just as credible as lots of the other caveats, the other promises that were made at the beginning of this war when Russia claimed it was in this to, quote, denazify Ukraine, whatever that means. I think, first and foremost, this is a warning. This is a warning to Ukraine that if it makes more advances in that part of the country where Ukraine is actually doing quite well, that Russia will basically annex these territories, hold a referendum that probably won't be recognized by anyone but Russia, and then use that idea that this is part of Russia to threaten the use of nuclear weapons should Ukraine try and take those areas back. And this is a warning to the wider world that is now stepping up deliveries of weapons to Ukraine, that Russia is willing to escalate, at least rhetorically. So this is definitely a warning. Whether or not people here in Ukraine are swayed much by this, I don't think so. I think they're expecting that from the Russian side, but definitely Russia trying to carry out these kind of pseudo-legal steps to somehow justify what they're doing there.
Nick Connolly reporting from Kremenchuk. Thank you so much for that update.